All right, let's dive into labor. When I talk about labor, I'm talking about like unions, collective bargaining, that sort of thing. So, down here at the very bottom, we have just some things that you should probably familiarize yourself. Nothing that goes onto a timeline, but you should pause the video and read the union tactics and anti-union tactics. And then I'm going to give you a story of all the things above. So these things at the bottom don't go on your timeline. All right, let's go on up to the top, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you almost all of these occur in time period 6. So you can go to time period 6. Some of them go into time period 7, but for the most part, time period 6. So let me give you a short story of each of these things, and you can kind of make like a bulleted list with like a few words out to the side of each one to remind you what each thing is. The AP test loves to talk about labor unions, so please take this seriously. Okay, so the National Labor Union started in 1866 and actually ended around 1873. It was like the first major attempt to form a big, giant labor union to improve working conditions. Some of their goals were an 8-hour day, advocate for the rights of workers, like workers' compensation, like getting hurt on the job. It include skilled and unskilled workers. So think like early assembly line, not really assembly line, but that sort of thing, along with artisans, people who are very, very good and well trained in their craft who had been like apprentices. It even allowed some women and African Americans, but it was mostly white men. I mean, it didn't survive super long, but the thing is, it was the first. Then we're going to get more of them that are more effective later. Knights of Labor was 1869. Yes, I have that on there. And it was a labor organization that included all workers, any skill or unskill, race, any gender. It advocated for economic reforms as well as social reforms, 8-hour workday, equal pay for women and men, equal pay for races, improved working conditions, like really ahead of its time. But they were associated with the Haymarket Square riot that we're going to talk about later. And collective bargaining and labor law reforms was kind of their way to go about it. Okay, American Federation of Labor, same time period, 1886. Founded by Samuel Gompers. You might see his name out there, a big labor guy. This was skilled workers only into craft unions like the glass blowers and the steel workers. So they tried to organize based on what sort of industry you were working in to collectively bargain for industry specific stuff. They want to improve wages, working conditions, all the other stuff. They do collective bargaining and strikes. All these people do. But the American Federation labor was not as inclusive. No women, no African Americans, that sort of thing. All right. Industrial workers of the world, we're moving into time period 7 now, the IWW, sometimes known as the Wobblies, which is fun. They had this goal of uniting all workers into one giant powerful union, which was the goal of the National Labor Union too, and kind of some of the others. But Eugene Debs is a big name here. He and the union advocated for like much more radical, a little bit socialist, maybe even some calls to overthrow capitalism. So strikes, boycotts, better working conditions for workers, even unskilled laborers who are kind of left out of other union, like skills specific, craft specific unions they would accept, but they kind of get this bad name because they kind of tend to be more socialist and like anti-government, not anti-government, anti-big business, sorry. All right, Congress of Individual Organizations, 1935. This is time period 7 again. And it was industrial unions, so like factory workers, organizing unskilled like assembly line workers in the steel and automobile and textile industry, because mass production and mass consumption is really, really big in the 1920s, and they saw this need. So they are kind of around during the New Deal era, during the Great Depression, trying to work with the federal government to make sure that in the midst of all the programs to help businesses and the help businesses during the New Deal, that workers are also protected too. They secure the Wagner Act and the National Labor Relations Board, which kind of the hope between that was that the government would like mediate disputes during the Great Depression between labor unions and the employers. Okay. United Farm Workers is 1962. It's actually still around. And this organized a lot of agricultural workers, particularly Hispanic Americans. They're fighting for better wages, better working conditions, you know, that whole deal. But it brings like more national attention to what it's like to be a migrant worker, someone who comes to America for job opportunities, finds a lot of agricultural job opportunities in the South, in the Sun Belt. There's mass migration to this area during that time. And grape growers is a big industry. The corn growers is a big industry that UFW works with. But it kind of has this new spin for labor union advocating specifically for the rights of immigrant workers. Okay, let's talk about big strikes and then we'll be done. Again, almost all of them in time period 6. Some of them bleed over into time period 7. The Great Railroad Strike, 1877, is nationwide protest against wage cuts and poor working conditions in the railroad industry. Starts in West Virginia. Railroad workers get a 10% wage cut, and the discontent with the railroad companies and the monopoly of railroad companies just spreads, and it involves over 100,000 different workers who strike. There are violent clashes. The military's called in. Federal troops are called in. The strike didn't really get what it wanted, but it starts this turning point where we're going to see strikes be the method of labor unions. All right, the Haymarket Square riot is where the Knights of Labor kind of gets nail in the coffin for them. This is 1886 in Chicago. This peaceful Knights of Labor rally advocating for an 8-hour workday gets violent when a bomb from, we don't know, gets thrown at police officers. So the bombing and the police shooting and just mass chaos, and there was death of some police officers and civilians, and it led to this like stamp on the face of the Knights of Labor that they use violent tactics, almost like they planned it to be that way. And so labor unions will get a bad reputation because of the Haymarket Square riot. Homestead Strike, 1892. This is against Carnegie Steel. The Carnegie Steel Company in Homestead, Pennsylvania, was seen as like this monopoly in the steel industry. They cut workers' wages, and many people lived in Homestead Steel housing. It's called a company town. They cut wages and raised rent at the same time. So the strike escalated into a pretty violent confrontation because there were strikers, and then Carnegie hired the Pinkerton Guards, which were like private military, like security guards that you could hire. And there was a violent clash, and some of the workers lost their lives. The state militia had to step in and defeat the strike. And again, it just shows like violence that can occur because of labor unions, and labor unions will end up not coming out looking so great. The Pullman strike was a railroad strike that started in Chicago with the Pullman Company. It was led by Eugene Debs and his labor union, and remember, he was a little bit more on the socialist side. The strike spread to other railroads, not just the Pullman Company in the mid-America. They were pushing over rail cars. They were destroying Pullman property. The strike had to be broken up by federal troops as well. So again, I keep saying it, but like this negative connotation. The anthracite coal strike in 1902 under President Teddy Roosevelt. This is time period 7. A bunch of coal miners, I'm talking like over 100,000 in Pennsylvania, go on strike because of the working conditions and the long hours in the mines. That's just like eating away at them. It was really large, and the federal government stepped in to kind of mediate the dispute. Teddy Roosevelt stepped in to kind of mediate the dispute, and it led to a settlement in which the miners received a pay raise and shorter hours. The owners don't recognize the union. The owners didn't like the union, but to keep the country going, because we need coal to keep the country going, the federal government stepped in and kind of mediated. And that is our major APUSH labor movements.